is a street in Mushin, Lagos, where for years people removed their shoes before they set foot on it. Not because there was a mosque or a church at the entrance, not because an elder commanded it, but because a woman who lived on that street had convinced them and convinced herself that she was God Almighty.
Malaika Agba, tí mo wà ní Mushin.
Ìṣèṣẹ́ kí n pera ní Malaika mo rò pé.
Torí pé mo jẹ́ Ọlọ́run alààyè.
Ẹ̀yin gangan lọ́lọ́run.
Èmi gangan ni Ọlọ́run alààyè. Bàbá tó mọ gbogbo tó sì ń ṣe gbogbo. Èmi ni ìbẹ̀rẹ̀ àti òpin. Èmi ni mò ń sọ àrà tí ayé àtọ̀run mì tìtì. Èmi ni gbogbo ayé máa jẹ́yìn fún ní ọjọ́ ìkẹyìn. Èmi ni Malaika Agba tí mo jókòó yìí lónìí.
Not a prophetess, not a servant of God, God herself, the creator of heaven and earth, the one who made everything that ever existed, and that woman's name was Malaika Agba. Her real name was Olayinka Oladipupo. She was born right in Mushin, on the same street where she would later declare divinity, in a house that still stood on Alafia Street near Isolo Road Junction. Her mother was from Isiwo Ijebu in Ogun State. Her father died long before her story reached its most dramatic chapters. As a young woman, she married and had 4 children. 3 of them died. And somewhere in that grief, somewhere in that loss, something shifted deeply in Olayinka Oladipupo. When she emerged from the other side, she was no longer Olayinka. She was Malaika Agba. The name itself carries weight. Malaika is the Swahili and Arabic word for angel. Agba is Yoruba for elder, for greatness, for the one who is above. Put them together and you have something that sounds ancient, powerful, and chosen. She did not name herself prophetess. She did not call herself pastor. She sat before her congregation and told them plainly, I am God. I created everything that has existed, all that exists now, and all that will ever exist. The complaints of human beings from their earthly struggles reached me in heaven, and I decided to come down and see for myself. Why she chose Nigeria, one writer later joked, out of all the suffering nations of the world is a question worth asking. But to her followers, the answer was obvious. God goes where God is needed, and Lagos, with all its noise and chaos and hunger for miracles, needed God. She founded the New Jerusalem Church and set it up on Alafia Street in Mushin. Though many records also place it around Alafia Junction. The building and its services had a look that reminded visitors of cherubim and seraphim churches. Fast, energetic worship, colorful flowing robes, songs that moved the body as much as the spirit. But there was one difference that made every visitor look twice. The praise and worship was not directed upward toward heaven. It was directed at the woman sitting at the front of the room. They were singing to her. Her followers numbered somewhere between 800 and 1,000 at her peak, and she ruled them completely. She demanded to be addressed as Baba, the Yoruba word for father. When people asked why a woman would take a man's title, she had a ready answer. She was not a woman, she said. She was also not a man. She was both, fused into one. She was God, and God contains everything. The title Baba was not just a name. It was a declaration of her theology. She was the father. She was the origin. She was the one who should be obeyed without question, and the neighborhood took note. Residents of the Alafia area later described her as a figure of sheer terror. Not the terrorizing kind that carries a weapon. The kind that walks slowly and everybody moves. The kind whose name, when spoken, changes the temperature of the room. People who lived near her church said they felt a shadow on that part of the street. A heaviness, a sense that something unusual was happening just behind those walls, and that it was better not to ask too many questions. Inside those walls, her doctrine was built on enjoyment. She told her followers that she had come to this earth from her celestial home, not out of obligation, not to suffer or to sacrifice, but for pleasure. Life, in her theology, was meant to be celebrated, and she led that celebration personally. She engaged in sexual relations with male members of the congregation at will. According to accounts from former members and neighbors, she did not request. She commanded. And when the command came, men obey. Some reports described her libido as legendary, as something people whispered about in fear and disbelief. She was God, and God, in her doctrine, was not bound by any human rule about what was permissible. Money was another front of her control. Followers gave her cash constantly, and she was known to reject offerings she considered insufficient by setting the notes ablaze right in front of the giver, then sending them away to return with the full amount she had demanded. And they did. They came back. They always came back. Because leaving Malaika Agba, former members would quietly tell you, was not something people did easily. There were stories about what happened to those who tried. Mysterious ailments, strange deaths. Nobody could confirm the details fully, but the stories were enough. Her church was also described as something between a Christian worship center and a mosque, holding services that blended both traditions. On Sundays, they sang like Christians. On Fridays, they gathered as Muslims might. The doctrine she preached was not anchored to any single text. It was anchored to her. Whatever Malaika Agba said was scripture. Whatever she did was holy. This was the world that existed on Alafia Street when a journalist decided he wanted to look closer. Kola Olawuyi was born in Ibadan in 1963 and would become one of the most feared and beloved investigative journalists in the history of Nigerian broadcasting. He created the program Iriri Aye on the Federal Radio Corporation of Nigeria in 1992, a show unlike anything Nigerian radio had heard before. Strange stories, real stories. The kind of stories people talked about in marketplaces and backyard kitchens, but that nobody in media was willing to touch. When his fearless approach made the program unwelcome at the government station, he did not stop. He formed his own company, Colbin Communications, and took the program to television, and every Friday evening, around 8 o'clock, millions of people across southwestern Nigeria gathered in front of televisions and radios to find out exactly what was happening. Kola Olawuyi went where other journalists would not go. He investigated ritual killings, occult societies, secret religious practices, and fake prophets who were bleeding their congregations dry. He exposed Reverend King, the preacher who would later be convicted of murder. He investigated TB Joshua's early church activities in a series that reportedly got his program banned from certain platforms and earned him a lawsuit. He was a man who understood that the truth in Nigeria does not always announce itself. Sometimes you have to go pull it out by the roots. And then he heard about Malaika Agba. He went to Alafia Street. He sat with her and he interviewed her on camera, the footage of which became one of the most talked about episodes in the history of Nkanmbe. Malaika Agba sat before the camera and said, without blinking, that she was the Almighty, that she created the heavens and the earth, that she could not die because death was one of the forces she controlled. She was confident. She was loud. She was, by all accounts of those who watched it, completely certain of what she was saying. There was no wavering, no searching for words. She said it the way a person states their address. I am God. That is the fact. The interview spread across Lagos. People who had heard whispers about the woman on Alafia Street now had a face, a voice, and a declaration. And while many mocked, a significant number of people watched and believed, or at least wondered, because there is something about absolute certainty that unsettles even the most skeptical mind. But then came the story of Bosede. Bosede Olani was born in 1984. In 1997, when she was 12 years old, Malaika Agba adopted her. Malaika said she had known the child's mother from a prayer mountain where they once worshipped together. She claimed she did not know the father. She took the girl in, and from that day, Bosede never left her side. She grew up inside the church. She lived inside Malaika's home. Whatever world existed outside those walls, Bosede had little contact with it. She was Malaika's ward, her girl, her personal charge. By the time she was 21 years old, Bosede Olani had spent nearly half her life inside that compound. In 2005, Bosede died. She died inside Malaika's home. And what happened next was the moment that cracked everything open. Malaika ordered the body to be buried quickly, not after official notification of the family, not after any formal process. The burial happened at Maturi Cemetery before the wider public had even been informed of the death. When questions started coming, Malaika said she had been at a church service when someone came to inform her that Bosede had died. She said the girl had complained of malaria, brief illness, sad but simple. It did not hold. The story had too many holes. The speed of the burial, the lack of family involvement, the years of complete isolation Bosede had lived through. Former members who had been watching from a careful distance began speaking. The public began demanding answers, and Kola Olawuyi, who had been watching all of this, pushed harder than he facilitated what became one of the most dramatic moments of his entire career. He got the body exhumed. Maturi Cemetery, workers opened the ground where Bosede had been buried weeks earlier. The body was lifted out. Two men who carried out the exhumation did not flinch. The corpse was taken to the military hospital on Awolowo Road in Ikoyi, where forensic pathologists examined it properly. What they found silenced every defense Malaika had offered. There was an accumulation of bacteria around Bosede's heart, and under her elbow, clearly visible, was a gaping injection mark. Bosede Olani had been injected with what nobody could establish with certainty then, and the answer remains unclear to this day. But the evidence was undeniable. Something had been introduced into her body. When confronted with this, Malaika Agba's story changed. She admitted that yes, she did carry out what she called spiritual surgeries on her followers. The purpose, she explained, was to evacuate the dirt in their stomachs, to cleanse them spiritual by going into the body and removing what was spiritually unclean. Before these surgeries, she injected her patient. She said this calmly, as though it were a routine medical procedure that any reasonable God would perform. The contents of the injection she gave to Bosede, and apparently to numerous other followers over the years, she never fully explained. And nobody was ever able to establish exactly what was in that needle. What became clear from former members and neighbors was that Bosede was not the only person who had died in Malaika's orbit under circumstances that did not add up. There had been other deaths, other disappearances, other people who entered that compound and whose next of kin received news of passing that came with no clear explanation and a request that the burial happen immediately. The spiritual surgery practice if it had been ongoing for years with an unidentified injectable substance, had the potential to explain all of it. But nobody could close that circle with certainty. Kola Olawuyi kept the pressure up. The public outcry that followed the exhumation and the forensic findings made it impossible to ignore. Malaika Agba was arrested and taken to the Criminal Investigation Department headquarters at Panti in Lagos State. There, she made confessions. The details of what exactly she confessed remain partially protected by the walls of that interrogation room. But what emerged was enough to confirm that what had been happening inside the New Jerusalem Church on Alafia Street was not simply an unusual religion. It was a controlled environment where a woman with unchallenged authority had been making decisions over the lives and bodies of people who believed she was divine. And then, in a turn that shocked even those who expected it, Malaika Agba was released. She walked out of Panti. Kola Olawuyi himself, in his account of the case, said he had to decide how hard to push it. He said he stepped back partly because if he pressed the matter further and Malaika was charged with murder, it was possible that he would be accused by Nigerians of being personally responsible for sending her to the gallows. He knew his audience. He knew that in a country where strange accusations travel fast and where investigative journalists are sometimes accused of the very evils they expose, perception matters. And so he let the formal prosecution die down while ensuring that her face and her confessions and the story of Bosede Olani had reached every corner of Lagos that would listen. After Kola Olawuyi died at just 44 years old, his passing stunned the Nigerian media world. He had been ill for the 3 months before his death, and those who had watched him expose the most dangerous people in southwestern Nigeria could not help wondering whether the illness had been natural. Many believed his enemies, accumulated over years of fearless journalism, had finally found a way to reach him. Nobody established how he died with certainty either. Like so many things connected to that world of hidden power and shadow religion that he had spent his career documenting, the answer was left open. And Malaika Agba kept her church, quieter than before, lower profile. The scandal had stripped away the loudness of her godhood. She could no longer sit in front of cameras and announce herself as the Almighty without people immediately thinking of Bosede Olani and the injection mark and the bacteria around her dead girl's heart. The neighborhood of Alafia Street no longer buzzed with the same energy of absolute submission that had once characterized her reign. But the church did not close. The followers, reduced but still present, stayed. And Malaika Agba, born Olayinka Oladipupo, in a house on that same street, continued to occupy her place as the god of whatever remained of her congregation. The question that this story leaves behind is not just about one woman. It is about what we are willing to believe when someone stands in front of us and speaks with total authority about total things. It is about what grief and longing and spiritual hunger can make a person surrender. Bosede Olani was 12 years old when she entered that compound and never truly left until she left in a box. She grew up inside a world built entirely around one person's claim to divinity, and we will never fully know what she experienced in those 9 years, what she witnessed, what was done to her, or whether in her last moments she still believed. That is the story of Malaika Agba, the woman who told Lagos she was God, who built a church on absolute obedience, who performed surgeries on the faithful with needles and unknown content, who watched a girl she adopted grow up inside her walls and then buried that girl before anyone could ask the right questions. And who, when the journalist and the forensic pathologist and the entire city came knocking, walked back out into the sunlight and kept preaching. Thank you for watching Top 10 Yoruba. If this story disturbed you, it was meant to. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss what we bring next. On Top 10 Yoruba, we do not look away from the stories that shake you. We go in, we pull them out, and we lay them before you. Because these things happened, because someone needs to say.
Malaika Agba, tí mo wà nínú iṣẹ́.
Ètò ìtẹ́ fi ń pera ní Malaika mo rò pé.
Torí pé mo jẹ́ Ọlọ́run alààyè.
Ẹ̀yin gangan lọ́lọ́run.
Èmi gangan ni Ọlọ́run alààyè. Ọba tó mọ gbogbo tó sì ń ṣe gbogbo. Èmi ni ìbẹ̀rẹ̀ àti òpin. Èmi ni mò ń sọ àrà tí ayé àtọ̀run mì tìtì. Èmi ni gbogbo ayé máa jẹ́yìn fún ní ọjọ́ ìkẹyìn. Èmi Malaika Agba tí mo jókòó yìí náà.
Kò gbọ́ ọ̀run lọ́yẹ kẹ́ ẹ wà ní.
Níwọ̀n ìgbà tí mo dá ọ̀run, mo dá ayé. Ayé jẹ́ pálọ̀ mi. Èrè mi pálọ̀ mi kí n má jókòó. Ayé is my pálọ̀. Ọ̀run ni mò ń gbé. Ọ̀run mo ti ń dábìrà. Mo wà láyé, mo wà lọ́run bí ìgbà mi ti ń ṣiṣẹ́.
Iṣẹ́ jáde kì í sí mi mo sì pé ọ̀yọ̀ ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ náà.
Ẹ sọ pé ẹni tó dá yín láwòrán rẹ̀ ó lè kó náà wà nù ayé kó máa ṣe bẹ́ẹ̀ ṣe ń ṣe kó máa pẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀ ṣe ń gbádùn. Ẹni tó bẹ̀ ní pé máa bí sí máa rẹ̀ sí ó ń dandan nígbà tí ẹjọ́ ti pọ̀ jù ilé ni wọ́n pa àwọn ọ̀làwọ́ ni wọ́n pa àwọn ilé afẹ́jọ́ wá sùn jẹ́ kí mi náà wá wo nǹkan tó ń ṣe ń bẹ̀.
Ìgbó lè wá délé ayé ńgbà ó lè bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí ní wá láyé wò.
Mo ti ń délé ayé kí wọ́n tó dá ayé mo ti wà nù ayé mo ti ń fi ayé wò kí ètò wa wá níwọ̀nba ọjọ́ tí mo wá yìí.
Ọ̀dà ìgbà táwọn òbí bí mo mọ̀ pé kì í ṣe Malaika mo sọ ní orúkọ gbọ́ngàn náà.
Mo ní Ọláyínká ni mò ń jẹ́ Ọláyínká Ọláyínká.
Àwọn olùbí bo ni wọ́n bí i sí.
Wọ́n bí mi sí ibi inú ilé náà bí mi sí. Ṣùgbọ́n ìyá mi bàbá mi ti kú ìyá mi wà lókè mọ́ mi.
Ṣùgbọ́n Ọlọ́run èyí kú lẹ́yìn òun nígbàgbọ́ pé ilé òun ṣaláìsí ìjọ kan.
Lẹ́kọ̀ọ́ dìgbà náà ni Ọlọ́run bá kí n kú Ọlọ́run bá ń kú ó dìgbà náà ṣùgbọ́n mi ò jẹun ní kú.
Ẹ jẹ́ nìyẹn ní.
Mi ò jẹun ní kú mi lè jẹun kan ní kú. Gbogbo ẹ̀yà fi mí sí lákè mi nìkan bí mo ṣe máa wà náà rìn. Tí n bá kúrò ní kọ́lọ̀ yìí máa di òyìnbó. Tí n bá di òyìnbó tán máa wá di òfurufú yẹn máa paradà. Kò wá ní sí ọ̀kan mọ́ ju ojú yìí nìkan lọ.
Ẹ ti rí ìlú ẹ̀rí náà.
Ṣebí àlàbà mi máa fi ara mi dá. Àtọ́ bá wù mí ni máa fi ara mi dá.
Táìlẹ̀ yóò wá jábọ̀ fún.
Mo máa jábọ̀ fúnra mi náà ni.
Ẹ̀yin lọ́lọ́run.
Èmi ní Ọlọ́run alààyè lọ wá mi kó mọ̀ mí. Ìwọ fún ara ẹ̀ tó bá kò mí lè mí lọ wá mi kó béèrè mi. Níbikíbi tó fi lè wá mi wá mi.
Mo lérò pé mo ti lè wá yín.
Ó ní lọ sí lè wá mi kò síbi tí mi ò sí. Nínú gbogbo nǹkan ni mo wà. Gbogbo nǹkan ni iṣẹ́ ọwọ́ mi.
Ẹ̀yin lè dókun àtọ́sà.
Èmi wà fún ẹ̀sìn. Mo wá ṣe fàájì mi. Mo lè fa mú ìwà ẹ̀wọ̀n èèyàn dání. Èmi mo dá òkun, mo dá ọ̀sà. Èmi gbogbo Ọlọ́run forí balẹ̀ fún. Tí wọ́n ké mímọ́ ẹ má sọ̀rọ̀ ní iwájú ẹ̀. Èmi gbogbo ìwáyé èèyàn kò ṣẹ̀yìn mi. Ìlọ ènìyàn kò ṣe ẹ̀yìn mi. Èmi kúrékùré náà ni. Èmi náà ni ọkùnrin, èmi náà ni obìnrin.
Dídí ẹ̀ ni wọ́n fi ń pè yín ní bàbá.
Nítorí ìdí ẹ̀ ni wọ́n fi ń pè mí bàbá. Èmi ìdàkọ́ mi lọ́kọ́ pè mí ní bàbá. Àwọn aláàta tí wọ́n rí ìrànlọ́ ni pé kò kí ń ṣe obìnrin bàbá ni kẹ́ máa pè é. Ìdàkọ́ mi lọ́kọ́ pè mí ní bàbá. Àwọn mùsùlùmí kan náà tiẹ̀ jẹ́ àwọn mùsùlùmí náà jẹ́ pé bàbá ni kì í ṣe obìnrin bàbá ni kẹ́ máa pè é.
Ṣùgbọ́n ẹ bímọ.
Mo bímọ.
Ọmọ mélòó ló bí?
Nígbà tí wọ́n á sí mo bí mẹ́rin okùn ẹyọ kan.
Sílẹ̀ ti bímọ.
Bẹ́ẹ̀.
Ìwọlé ọkọ tẹ́ ẹ fi bímọ.
Mo wọlé ọkọ. Mo fẹ́ ọkọ. Ilẹ̀ bímọ.
Ọkọ mi wá ń kọ́.
Ọkọ mi wà.
Ẹ̀yin lè dá ọkọ yín náà.
Èmi náà ni mo dá. Èmi náà mo dá ọ̀nà tó sọ̀rọ̀ lọ́wọ́.
Kì í ṣe ẹ̀yin lè dá yìí. Bẹ́ẹ̀ ni.
Ẹ má bínú.
Ọlọ́run ló dá mi.
Ẹ̀mí náà lọ Ọlọ́run tí mo dá yín.
Mi ò tí ì rọ́lọ́run rí.
Ẹ wá ní ìṣó pé nísìnyí tó bá nígbà tí ó wá bẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ́wọ́ mi wàá wo ibikíbi tó o bá mọ̀ tó lè fi wà mo fi wà sọ pé ẹni tó bá ń parọ́ fún ẹ ó yẹ kí ẹ̀rí ọba Jésù lọ́wọ́ ẹ̀.
ẹ̀mú sùúrù Màláìka ṣé bíbélì lẹ̀ ń lò ní àbí Kùránì?
kò sí ọkàn tí mò ń lò.
ẹ nígbàgbọ́ nínú bíbélì.
èmi náà dá méjèèjì àti Muslim àti Christian.
ẹsẹ̀ wo ló fìdí ẹ̀ múlẹ̀ nínú bíbélì pé ẹ̀yin ni Ọlọ́run?
dábàá wa ẹ̀rọ.
tó jẹ́ kí n wá kì í tiẹ̀ ṣe ọ̀rọ̀ ẹni tó bá wọn kálukú ló lè pe ara ẹ̀ ẹ̀bẹ̀ ṣe lẹ́yìn lọ́lọ́run àwọn tí ó bá ń wò wá tó bá gbàgbọ́ ló gbàgbọ́ èyí tí ó sì gbàgbọ́ tó mọ Ọlọ́run.
ìwé ẹ̀dá ìgbọ̀fọ̀ ayé ò tiẹ̀ gbàgbọ́
ẹ̀mí ọ̀gbàgbọ́.
wàá gbàgbọ́ nígbà tó bá yá.
nígbà wo ni màá gbàgbọ́?
ìwọ fi yẹn lẹ̀ wàá gbàgbọ́ nígbà tí ó bá yá. nǹkan tí yóò jẹ kò lè pè é láláyé pé òun jẹ tó bá jẹ òun àtọ́lọ́wọ́ àjọ wọ.
Ọlọ́run mélòó ló wà?
èmi nìkan náà ló wà.
ẹ tí rẹ nìkan kan bèrè lọ́wọ́ nínú irú pé ìpera yín lọ́lọ́run.
kò sẹ́ni tó lè bèrè lọ́mí tí mi ní dá lóhùn torí pé tí máa jẹ́ Síkírá màá ní Síkírá lórúkọ mi.
ẹ bá sì gbọ́ lọ́run.
mẹ́lẹ̀ ìjọba
kí nàìjíríà jẹ́lẹ̀ fọlọ́run ṣe ni àbí orúkọ yín gan.
orúkọ mi gangan ni Olódùmarè. ìwọ́n tí mi náà pera yín bẹ́ẹ̀ ẹ̀yin náà sọ pé ẹ̀yin náà jẹ́ nǹkan tí mi náà jẹ́ nǹkan tí mo pera mi yẹn ẹ sọ pé ẹ̀yin náà ń jẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀.
ẹ rò bẹ́ẹ̀ ń bá pera ẹ̀ lọ́lọ́run kì í ṣẹ̀ṣẹ̀ lọ́dà.
nísìnyí tí nǹkan tí yóò bá kí ń jẹ tó bá lóun ń jẹ ẹ̀ṣẹ̀ ni nǹkan tí mi ń jẹ èmi ń jẹ.
orúkọ tó wù yín lẹ̀ jẹun.
Ọlọ́run àgbáyé lèmi ń jẹ.
orúkọ tó wù yín lẹ̀ jẹ.
orúkọ tó wù mí kọ́ ni mo ń jẹ orúkọ tí mò ń jẹ gangan láti ayé báyé kí wọ́n tó dá ayé àtọ̀run òun náà mò ń jẹ́ dọ̀la. kò sí nǹkan tó lè yí padà lẹ́nu mi bẹ́ẹ̀ ni ò jẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀ mọ́ yẹn kò sí nǹkan tó lè yí.
kò sí tó fẹ́ ní kẹ́ yí padà orúkọ tó wù yín là jẹ́ lẹ́yìn òdì.
ẹnu ò bẹ́yìn òdì o inú nǹkan iṣẹ́ ọwọ́ mi tí mo mọ ni mo wà ní òsílẹ̀yìn òdì.
ẹ̀yin lọ fọwọ́ ara yín mọ
èmi ni mo fọwọ́ mi mọ ayé mo fọwọ́ mi mọ ọ̀run ni mo lè fọwọ́ mi mọ gbogbo ọ̀run tó wà ń bẹ̀ tí o bá sọ orílẹ̀ èdè rẹ̀ tí o kò bá rí bẹ̀ ọmọ ìkéré ló máa pàjẹ́.
Ọlọ́run
ẹ o.
tí gbogbo ń tẹ̀ ń sọ yìí èmi nígbà wọ́pọ̀ lọ́wọ́ ojú àwọ̀ ẹ̀dá àjẹ́ńbẹ́lé ayé òun bẹ́ẹ̀.
èmi náà hùwà mi ò hùwà ọmọ ẹ̀dá mi ò ṣe nǹkan mi ì ṣe kọ́ láburú rí.
láburú rí.
mi ì ṣe rí mi ò hùwà ibi rí tí n bá wù mí ní jẹ́kẹ́ wọlé mi ò hùwà ibi rí nǹkan tí mo rọra mi ni mò ń ṣe.
ìṣètọ́lọ́run rẹ̀.
nǹkan tí èmi náà lọ́rùn tí mo rọra mi níṣẹ́.
gbogbo ní tẹ́ ò ń ṣe yìí gan lè ń ṣe fúnra rẹ̀.
èmi gan ni mò ń ṣe fúnra mi.
kò sọ́lọ́run mi kankan bì kan.
èmi kan iṣẹ́ náà ni mo jókòó yìí kò sí èmi bí kan èmi gan ni mo jókòó yìí.
ẹni tó bá ń wò yìí ò ní rò pé bóyá àbí ń tẹ́ ń sọ ẹ̀ mọ́.
orí mi pé mi ò ya wèrè mi dẹ̀ sí ibi tó máa ìjẹta ẹni tó máa fẹ́ ṣe research kó lọ ṣe research.
bó wọn ti bẹ̀rẹ̀ research yẹn.
òbí tó ti lè bẹ̀rẹ̀ research bó jẹ́ ilé aláàfà mo wà ń bẹ̀ bó jẹ́ ilé wòlíì mo wà ń bẹ̀ bó jẹ́ pé kí n dá pẹ̀lẹ́ kalẹ̀ mo wà ń bẹ̀.
ẹ sọ nìkan pàtó nú àwọn alálàáfà àti
mi ò mọ ẹnìkan
tó lè sọ wípé Ọlọ́run ni lóòótọ́.
àkó tó bá ti wá ṣèbí wọn ní pé wẹ́ẹ̀dì ohun gbogbo dájú omi tó ṣe òdodo.
ọ̀dẹ̀ ìjà fi ti Ọlọ́run èmi mọ Ọlọ́run kan ṣoṣo tí mi mọ̀ ló wà
lórí. o ti tún àmì lẹ́ẹ̀fì gbogbo yẹn lẹ̀.
ìjà fi ilẹ̀ nítorí ká wá ní ọ̀rọ̀ ọmọ kan tí wọ́n ní ṣẹ̀ṣẹ̀ ṣaláìsí lọ́dọ̀.
Bọ́sẹ̀.
wọ́n Bọ́sẹ̀ lórúkọ ẹ̀ wọ́n lọ́dọ̀ ní ló ń gbé. n ta àsìkò ọdún jẹ́ ká wá tó ti bá la ṣe wáyé.
ẹ̀mí náà wà.
àríkà bá ilé náà mo ṣe ní pé tó gbogbo pẹ̀tẹ́ wá rẹ̀ pé jàǹjà tó yẹ kẹ́ ẹ̀ lò kó tó lè pé àyà yín sórí móhùnmáwòrán kí ni tó ṣẹlẹ̀ pẹ̀lú kú Bọ́sẹ̀.
ẹ̀mí náà ló ti ní sọ́wọ́.
ó ṣe wà ní.